welcome back to another episode of Raise 'em Up here in episode 4 of season 6 with a grown-up guides to kids wiring. And I am learning, y'all, the deeper I get into this. Well, first of all, this chapter, I am finally like, yes, this is the stuff that I need. But then 2, I find myself talking about this with others as we're doing this podcast. Are y'all doing the same thing?
Oh,
Are
yeah.
you referring to people as yellows or reds or talking to them about their kids?
so
Like,
blue
well,
of them.
their needs are, like,
Yeah.
it was so funny. I even just we were just talking baptism yesterday, a family in my office, and it was whole family. So little girl that's going to be baptized, an older brother. And it was just abundantly clear. I said, my gut's going to tell me he's a red.
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, like, I picked up this book and then opened to reds and said, like, just did the thing. It's like a workbook for a child, right?
Yeah.
Do they do this, and this, and this? Well, yeah. All right.
Well, yeah.
This
Here
book's
you
going
go.
to be really helpful. Podcast is coming out.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so true. Like, of so many of the books and resources that we've read, there's bits and pieces that plug in, but this one is so clear that it seems really easy to plug it in, or just like it just is an easy filter to wear as you talk with people. So I find it to be very user friendly in that way.
And it's for everybody,
Every
right?
single person.
So some of the books that we've read and discussed have been more for families with younger children,
Right.
families with older children, right?
Yeah.
This one is for everybody and not just the kids. It's for
Right.
us too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why I do that.
That's why I do that.
That's me. Okay. Yeah, I get that. Or that's why my husband does that.
Which is funny because, like, I'm a green. Hello, my name is Lee. I'm a green. Hi,
Hello, Lee.
And like this chapter was finally, because some of the weaknesses, I was like, that's not me. That's not me. But like when it started explaining the signaling pieces, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I do that. I do that.
So this
Yeah.
confirmed that Peyton is a green for those who
Yeah.
don't believe me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
reading this, I was like, yeah. And that Carson really is 2 colors. I'm like, yep, she's
Yeah.
totally probably equal red and blue.
Yeah.
There you go.
I got it. Okay. Yeah. I was like, confirmation.
That's
Peyton's got yellow, but no, she is definitely green.
All right. So
That's cool.
the topic that helped ignite, right, all of these thoughts as we're starting out this podcast was signals. So what do we mean by the word signals?
It's that fuel light that pops on in your car.
And I
it's
love that illustration.
Such a good one. Yeah. When you're working from your strengths and your temperament, that's when your tank is full. But when you don't have your innate needs being met, that tank gets emptier and emptier. And then you start acting out of your weaknesses. And then sometimes it gets to the point that you're, unconsciously sending out signals that your tank is empty. And so this happens to our kids as well. And each temperament has obviously different strengths and weaknesses like we've talked about, but they also send out different signals when their tank is dangerously empty.
And it's so interesting because, like, it noticed how those signals are often some sort of spectrum of their strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
Right? So
Yep.
so the way that they are wired, like when it's their strengths and the tank is full, their needs are being met, there are all these signals like that. It's like, oh, this is a joy.
Yeah.
But then those same exact strengths are used for evil when the needs are not being met.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this was the eye-opening chapter again. Like people know if they're listening along with the season, I've used it's great in work environments. It's easy for me to understand there.
Yep.
But particularly in coaching teams, like that has been my thing is like, okay, this hasn't been working. And I think part of it is that mentality that old American mentality of coaching is yelling and getting fired up and blah, 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 and demanding this and demanding that, which like I'm terrible at. But like, it's one of those recognizing certain needs. Cause I remember at certain points, I think last year's basketball season is always going to be one of the most memorable basketball seasons. And the parents of this, if they're listening to this, they're like, no,
Yup.
Pastor Lee, we totally understand. Cause I remember at one point, like I had a post game talk. Even I remember having a pregame talk at this one, actually saying like, quit being a bunch of jerks, right? Pretty much. And after the game, like all the kids are around me, but the parents are around me too, hearing what I'm saying. And I'm saying stuff like, yeah, tonight I heard some of the most disrespectful things that have ever been said to me come out of your mouth. This has to stop, right?
Wow,
That kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But I'm recognizing now what it was.
Yeah.
I had some reds and some yellows that were, especially the Reds, that were, their needs were not being met because of what was happening. And I'm recognizing there's a way that I could have even handled my coaching and my conversations and the way I approached that game a little differently that maybe could have helped in that situation. And instead of just getting really frustrated that you just said something incredibly disrespectful to me, I could have recognized what it was. I just appreciate this chapter so much.
Yeah. It's all about shifting to see that, the signals are not weapons against us. They truly are signals that something is missing for this kid. And, because a lot of times we'll see behaviors that come out, and the behaviors really have nothing to do with us, though that's the temptation for me as a blue and a red, is to feel super disrespected or super targeted by the behavior choices of my kids. But the reality is that they're not, it's usually not a conscious choice to disrespect or be, disobedient, but it's an inability to control their surroundings in a way that meets their own needs. So it really is a cry for help. And I mean, that's something that I think has kind of gotten desensitized, that idea that their behavior is a cry for help. But this chapter just kind of paints it in a different picture.
It's kind of like where it started, though. Go ahead. And then
I was saying, it's kind of like that old saying, the issue is not the issue.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So with all of these kids, like the signal is actually just telling you something is up, right? That a need is not being met. You think it's the what, like what's happening in that disrespect, but there's actually a why. There's a need not being met. And so it's just helpful to learn your kid, learn the language, learn the needs so that you can recognize when that gaslight's coming on.
Right. And where she started, like the chapter was, does it seem unreasonable that you, the grown-up, should have to change your communication approach when it comes to your child, right?
Yeah.
Some of us who are almost 50, maybe 50 by the time this comes out. We grew up, right? My parents said it, I do it. There's no middle ground. And the way that I felt about it really wasn't an issue.
Wasn't relevant.
At all, right? Which probably should have been, because I can look at a lot of my behaviors and things that I did going, oh, yeah, that's because this need wasn't met or whatever, that kind of thing. But as parents now, right, just like everything else, we learn more, we know more is out there and publicized that you can read and look at. And the way that maybe we grew up isn't the best way. And it's okay for us to change the way we say something. Not that necessarily I'm allowing my child to be rude and disrespectful and argumentative and, or lazy and not do her things and get things done. But I'm realizing the why behind it, and I'm finding better ways to teach them to be successful, functioning human beings and adults when they grow up that can, work in a workplace and things like that and get things done.
Yeah.
But that is going to mean that maybe I have to change the way that I'm looking at or thinking about something because of things,
The picture that's coming into my brain is when people deal with technology, right? And it's just not working. And when people get really frustrated with technology, whether or not something's not coming on or something's not opening up, what do? They like physically abuse whatever technology it is. They start hammering it, banging on it, all this other stuff. And you're like, if you just press the on button, use it, right? Like if you just use one, exactly. If you just honor its design, and that's what it is for these kids. Or unplug it.
Sometimes it just needs to be unplugged and reset.
Yeah,
there you
go.
Just
like our children.
Number one rule. Yeah, number one. Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on?
Just unplug it and reset.
But that's exactly what we're talking about with these kids. They have a certain wiring that you can speak to, that you can use the way it's meant to operate, and honor that, and all of a sudden it'll go better. Crazy, like. Hitting it, yelling at it is not going to change what's happening right now. Well, it actually might make it worse.
And we all find ourselves in these parenting ruts or coaching ruts or just frustrating patterns with people. And it's like, well, what control do you have? Probably not a whole lot, except that you can change your approach, right? So I assume, I love that she says, I assume if you're reading this book, it's not because you're doing great and everything's working. She's saying like, if you're reading this book, it's probably because the yelling or the way that you're addressing these, problem behaviors that you see isn't working. And so, let's try what we can do, which is to change your approach. And she says time and time again, she sees parents come back and go, oh my gosh, you're right. I filled up their tank and it changed everything. It's kind of the gospel too. I mean, really, like it's kind of the gospel too. Guilt and yelling and, throwing the book at us does not change the heart and the behavior, but loving us deeply for who we are, where we are in the middle of our mess is what starts that transformation. Like and that's, again, what we want our words to be a gift to the people that hear them. Same thing here. Like we want our words to affirm our deep love for our children because that's going to motivate their heart to follow Jesus. Like that's going to motivate the transformation, not shame, not guilt, not get in line. Anyway, I love this book.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention that as much as this is a great tool and we talked about, in addressing our kiddos' issues, I think it's also a great way for us to be self-reflective of our own stuff. Because I remember last night I was being a total yellow, and my wife and my son rolled their eyes at me because they're red and blues. And so I was just being so dramatic, and my wife is like, "Stop being dramatic." And I'm like, no, this is my sweet spot. Come on, let me be dramatic. And I was going on, and they just totally ignored me. And I was like, I was just doing this very thing. I was charming and
Are we the same person?
I
Because
know,
the same thing happened. My husband and my daughter looked at each other last night and both walked away from me in the middle of my drama. And I was like, what are you doing? That is not right.
I had a little pity party, and then I was like, this is not so fair.
When you picked up your book and went, oh.
Seriously.
Exactly.
I think we're living the same life.
Yes, we are, girl.
Are you ready for this, though? As we walk through each of these and the signals, like, do you know the two colors that I was like, tell me more? Tell me more.
Yeah.
One was yellows.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, please help me understand yellows.
He's working with the yellows.
Yes.
Well, but with the kids, right?
One
The
in my
kids,
house too.
we have so many now, and granted, like I love how we talked about like there's this masking piece too, but like there are so many like very true yellow kids that I work with on a regular basis that I'm like, okay, I've got to figure out how in the world to speak to them and how in the world to meet their needs.
Yeah.
And again, going back to last episode where we talked about like truly it was just a bunch of yellows on that and potentially reds on that junior high mission trip that made me go, okay, I got to think about this. Well, then the reds are the other ones that, and I think it's because being an introvert, right? So that's the one side that I can fully get to. I am an introvert. I'm people oriented, but I am an introvert and I can be task oriented. So my brain's a little weird in that front, but the extrovertedness is the foreignness to me. So, and I think because of that, yellows and reds are the more challenging in a group setting because as they take their extrovertedness to the extreme, when their tank is empty, it's very public and it's very
loud,
noticeable, right? Because I mean, in a yellow's case, they want to be noticed, and so they're going to get it how they can. And in a red's case, it's that control piece, which can, I loved how it said, can often present itself as anger, but it's not actually anger. Like that helped me so much. So I think it'd be fun to just dive into each of these colors to talk through. So as our parents or whoever is listening, right? Think of those kids in your life of what are you listening for? Do you have yellows? Do you have reds? Do you have blues? Do you have greens? So that you can kind of hear those signals for your kid's tank being empty. Yeah.
And I think speaking as a yellow, the thing that I really loved is that for us, just a single, and again, going to using love languages. So it depends on how you're communicating that too. A hug means the world to me.
Sure.
Like that would set my day going, or just being approved. Like I think yellows constantly seek approval. And I see that with the young yellows because they haven't figured out how to communicate. That
absolutely
approval. And so it comes across as obnoxious behavior because that's the only way they seem to get the attention.
Good. When you're speaking all those words of the innate needs, right? So when a yellow isn't getting attention, affection, or approval.
Exactly.
Those are it. And I think thankfully she used 3 A's. That helps us.
Yes.
Attention, affection, approval. That's a yellow. That's what they're after. But when they're not getting it, the way that they signal, there's 2 ways.
Yep.
There's charm and there's flattery.
And I like how she said, are you familiar with the phrase buttering up?
Yes.
Because really, that's when their charm and their flattery, right? They're trying to butter you up to get those needs
Yes.
met. And I will confess, like, I haven't watched any videos up until this
I haven't
point,
either.
but I watched them today.
Oh, good.
They
Okay.
are so
I
good.
watched them for this chapter because I was like, I want to see what does this look like? I don't know what today, I don't know what, or this chapter made it different.
I
was
wanted
looking
to. I
at
just
it going,
didn't.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah, I see that. Yeah, yeah. And of course I'm a yellow and I'm like, yeah, that's me. Totally do that. And then for my red and my green, I'm like, and my kind of blue too. I'm like, yep, yeah. Oh, I see those. Yes.
That's what that
So it
looks
was
like.
kind of interesting to watch the kids actually explaining, because this time it was the kids telling exactly what they do.
Yeah.
And the older ones totally knew. Like,
They knew they
it
were
was
doing it. Yeah.
hilarious.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's an interesting piece of the chapter too. It says like young kids don't know that this is what
No.
they're doing. They're not
Mhm.
doing it intentionally. This is just the response to an empty tank.
Mhm.
As you get older, you do kind of know what you're doing, and so it becomes sort of manipulation in an unhealthy way in some
Right.
cases, right?
Yeah.
Like when your signals are really no longer signals. It's I'm trying to manipulate the circumstances to get my
Yes.
needs met.
Mhm.
I absolutely know what that looks like for me. And when I get to that point,
Yeah.
and I'm like, my tone and my volume get up here, and you will do it because I said so. Like those kinds of dumb things that don't work come out of my mouth.
And the yellows are the drama. The kid laying on the ground and I'm gonna die.
I don't
I'm
want
like,
to.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the words they kind of
That's
use. They
my
use
life.
the phrase over the top,
Over the top.
elaborate.
Yeah.
But it can also be like over the top, that praise, that flattery.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
uh-huh.
Oh,
you're
mommy, I
so
love you so
great.
much.
You're so
Oh, there's
The
nothing
best
true about
mom.
that one. Nothing
You are
true.
the nicest
I'm
mommy
just
in the
letting
world.
you know
Will you make
you
my
messed
lunch
up,
for me?
mama.
You know, when that comes out, you're like, uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my family knows that by now, so they just roll their eyes at me. But yes,
Oh, that's awesome.
But this is so important for us to notice, right? So when this is happening, that's the signal. And I appreciate kind of like the part 2 of the book thing. So they do a great job of color coding.
I love color.
It's
So there's a
fantastic.
whole like section back here of like after the strengths and things like that. It starts talking about the signals, recognizing yellow's signals, and then being able to respond. Well, because like for instance, I'll give you just one example of the where's the toddler example. So you're at the playground with your 4-year-old yellow toddler and her baby brother. While you chat with another parent or a nearby bench, your daughter repeatedly interrupts and begs you to play with her. You patiently explain that you cannot leave the baby unattended, but 3 minutes later, she has returned and is tugging on your arm and whining, "It will be so much fun if you just come push me on the swings, please." Right. And the invitation is the what to respond to the what would be like, stop it. Like I have told you, I
Yeah.
need to keep your right. And that's going to completely cut off.
Yeah, because we get stingier, right? So the more that they're begging and they're pleading and they're rolling around on the ground, and they're
the more you're like,
Yeah.
I will not give
or
in.
the
I do
adult
not,
is sharing her drama because she's, whatever.
Right.
You walking away
And-
or
Yeah.
you continuing to say, look, I've got to help the baby right now. I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
what's
not
not being met right now is your eyes aren't on her.
Yes.
Mhm.
Right. And she's not getting the affection that she feels like she needs.
Yep.
So the first thing you do is you respond to the why as you kind of validate some feelings, right?
Yeah.
It seems like you really want someone to play with you, and it's no fun that I'm stuck here on the bench, right? You as an
Mhm,
adult are
mhm.
finding or connecting with where they're coming from. You're acknowledging the need not being met. And then you lean into those strengths with that
Yeah.
invitation. It says, "You're such an adventurous big sister. Do you think you could climb all the way to the top of that tall slide? We'll watch. You'll get attention.
Right.
And I bet your brother will clap for you when you make it to the bottom," right? So it's like one of those like turning it into what do they need? Like they want
Yep.
to be at the center. They want the attention, all this other stuff. I'm trying to give an
And
example
then,
of,
and there's like a redirect in there.
yeah, exactly.
There's just that hint of like, okay, how can you use your strengths to get what you need in a better way than tugging on my arm and interrupting, right? So that's a great one.
And they've got a situation for the tween, but I'll skip over to the teen, right? So it talks about a teacher in a class is noticing that their yellow is not participating today. They're actually looking at their phone the whole time. And why is that? Because this boy is getting texts from a girl, right? Attention, okay? Affection, all these other things. So what's the encouragement, right? You can make you definitely address it. It's not
Yeah.
asking you to hide the fact
Right.
that he did this. You're not allowed to be on your phone. But then the next time they step into the classroom, before the class even gets going, hey, discussions are really awesome when you participate. I think we all get a lot out of that. Like, how about we start off with you today? right? So it's
Yeah.
again getting that attention, getting that direction, but then also affirming that your presence, your words, your conversation are so helpful for us.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a good redirect. Again,
Yes.
just cutting it off before it even happens. Which a lot of times with yellows, at least like reading through all the different pieces in the back here, a lot of it is just acknowledgement that they
Yes.
exist.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the smile, the hello, the fist bump, the high five.
It matters
The how
that
was
you're
your
here.
day?
Yeah.
The hey, how'd that thing go? Tell me all about it.
Yep.
Right? The how's your friend doing? The relationship centered thing.
Yep.
Like those are all tremendous invitations to engage those strengths, right?
That's awesome. There's so many good things here because again, it's connecting. We're always trying to be proactive in filling the tank. That was another piece in this chapter that I thought was very helpful because, a lot of times we wait until there's a problem and we wait until the signal, and it's like, that's a terrible strategy in every other area of your life. Do you wait until your pantry's entirely empty? Do you wait until,
I feel seen.
I'm so sorry. Do you wait
I feel
until,
called out.
the fuel light in your car is blinking and, start running on oil and there's smoke coming out? Like, no, you don't wait for that. Like you try to be proactive and anticipate the needs and have a cushion there for all these different events. We need to do that with our relationships too, by pouring in the innate needs of the people around us. And it's not that hard. It doesn't have to be that extravagant. Like, Uma, I loved it. You said, I get a hug and that like makes my day. I want to be seen. And the fact that Kathleen is giving us all these tools just in words, it doesn't have to be some elaborate thing. It's a couple things that you can say in a day that are truly going to make the difference in the health of your relationship with your child.
Right.
I skipped over the tween, but I realized how significant it was for me reading that one. That situation was a kid that a baseball team selected 2 captains and the yellow didn't get picked. Now the yellow takes that as attention's not on me. I'm not liked enough. I'm not blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it was like, as a coach, like you have this opportunity to go, hey, I bet that was really tough. I acknowledge that, but I hope you see like how much you are a significant part of this team. We get so hyped up when you have the energy and we need that. Actually, will you start us with warm-ups?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Will you get us going? Will you encourage us? Will you hype us up? Right. Things like that. And so it's helping them. It's inviting them to see the way that they are valuable and the way that they're a part of the team. And I think that's so
instilling
key.
them a value. And I think that's what's so important is you giving them that value that they're seeking so much.
Yeah. Because it's not, we need to make him a captain too.
No.
You can't make everybody a captain.
No.
Right.
But and like the acknowledgement that your team's going to be better when everybody's in their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Like the payoff is there. This isn't like, oh, hey, this is going to cost a lot because now I have to pander to everybody's individual needs. No, it's like, hey, the payoff is worth it.
Absolutely.
Because every person that you have running on all cylinders, like that's going to be fantastic for your home, for your classroom, for your team. So it's an investment that has an immediate and ongoing payoff by filling up people's tanks with intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that was a very task-oriented way of looking at it, rather than a people-oriented way of looking at it. But it's, I mean, for some of us, it's like, I don't know if I have the energy to do that. Really, you do. It doesn't take much. It takes a whole lot more energy to try to maintain a system that isn't working, like the one you're currently in, because you're listening to this podcast or because you're me. Like,
or trying to shape your kid into what they're not.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
you're
yeah.
working way harder to get your kid to be something that they're not.
So work smarter.
Not
by
harder.
Looking at the situation for what it is and seeing your kid.
And at least the hard part for me, like this is what I'm struggling with. Because again, it's not like I have kids in my household that I'm trying to figure out. But like if I'm talking about just to someone that's coaching or in a classroom and things like that, the hardest part is the upfront work, right? Once you can establish the framework, once I know affection, I got to look at my notes, attention, approval, right? For yellows, then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, got it. Like, so I'm going to be able to reckon everybody's going to be seeing the signals. And as you talk about them, those are easy to remember, but it's really remembering those strengths so that you can, or those needs, those innate needs, so that you can ask yourself, okay, how can I possibly redirect this to meet a need so I can change this behavior faster, right? That's the hard work. I seriously, the nerd in me was like, okay, maybe I'll learn this stuff by having to write a paper on each of the colors, and that will help me like retain this even more. Like I'm reading this chapter last night, and that is the way my brain is working.
That is
think
hilarious.
you're green or blue.
Well, but it's because like my the people oriented side, like I want these kids,
Sure.
and that's that weird
Yeah.
task thing though too.
Yeah.
That balance of people and task for me is because like I want the wholeness of the group to be better, to feel better,
Yeah.
and it's like so we got to do these ABC in order to get there.
Yeah.
And in order
And
for me
it's
to retain
interesting
it.
how the way you're wiring, again, this is talking about temperament, right? How you're looking at from doing a paper and all that stuff. Whereas if I'm approaching, I'm looking at the individual kiddos and I'm like, how do I invest in relationship with each of one of them to meet, pretty much meet
And
the
again,
same thing.
yeah, it's the
But we're
same
both
goal.
operating from our own
Oh
strengths.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Yeah.
need to know, and I know I need the relationship, but like the thing that I feel like I'm missing is the information. I know the
Yeah.
kids, like, and so it's really funny. Like as I'm going through like the current team I'm coaching, I'm going, okay, definitely red. You put yellow. Green. Wow. Okay, green. You know, like I'm going through each one of them, but some of them I have question marks.
Yeah.
I think the blues and the greens are the hardest to identify, honestly. Even though I am a green, because of that whole masking piece and being in that social setting,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so now how do I remember what they need? Like that's the
Right.
part. So it's the information. So it's kind of like I need some sort of framework back here. in order
Or
to
like,
sort of move in.
have everybody wear a hat that says what they need.
They
on
should
it,
have
you know?
colors.
Yes.
Something.
Hey,
Let's
for
do
Well,
me,
it.
but with the words,
Hey.
with the words.
Just the words. Well,
Approval,
next week
attention,
when we talk
affection.
about our temperaments, we should all wear our colors.
Bro, that's
I
it.
think that's
We
it.
wear hats that have our innate needs on them for like a week, and then
I
we'll
love it.
remember. I love ideas.
Yes,
That'd
they're
be so
all
helpful.
golden, right? And none of them are.
All right, Reds.
Let's go, Reds.
So like again, what are the needs that they're looking for? Loyalty, sense of control, credit for work, appreciation.
Yep.
So not 3 A's, really hard to remember.
I know. Yeah.
But like
we'll
that
get back
sense
to
of
it
control
with
is a big one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, it's not that I need to be in control, but it's that things are under control. And so
Yes.
so when things are feeling out of control, you're going to see a red increase their tone and their volume.
Yes.
And so the tone might be harsh or
That's the
biting
signal.
comments.
That's the
Yep.
Eli. Yeah.
That's the signal. And angry outbursts and yelling. And again, I love that you already mentioned this, that it's not necessarily always the true anger. It's usually fear. Like,
Exactly.
well, if we don't get our stuff together, like this is, it's just going to spiral. But it comes out as being angry, and a lot of times it comes out as being disrespectful. When a kid is signaling red. So like when my son is losing it because things are not going according to plan and I'm asking him to be flexible, he's just like, well, why? You should have told me about this. And I'm like, excuse,
Is that blue or is that red?
it's both.
Okay,
Probably.
okay,
It's
okay.
probably both. But for him, it's definitely the red.
Okay.
But yeah, this doesn't make any sense to me. And like, well, what about this? Well, why don't we just do it this way? And he's trying to get the ship corrected in his own mind. And so then me and my red, I'm raising my tone and my volume. And then, it derails very
Yes,
quickly.
yes.
And
On
it
the-
becomes a battle of the wills. And that's never pretty.
On the
And then my green is like, see you in the car. It's hard, but yeah. So I noticed that. I mean, even this morning, I asked them to do something and they're like, well, Daddy did it this way. And I'm like, and I'm right here telling you to do it this way. Can you just help me out with it? And they're, it was like, I'm looking for just a piece of cooperation and they're seeing it as a whole paradigm shift.
Mhm.
And so then, it was I really feel for my green blue daughter because the reds, we were just, I mean, it was not pretty. I really love the section in this book that talks about like, if you're a red parenting a green
Yes.
child, if you're a
Me
red
too.
parenting a blue child, on and
And
on
that's
and
the
on.
next chapter, right? It's going to start
In the
making us
next,
look at us.
yes, in the next
Yeah,
couple
okay,
chapters.
okay.
So there is that kind of stuff in there because I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, clearly my needs are not being met and I'm signaling and
Yes.
he's signaling. Okay, I've got to get the air mask on,
Mhm.
I've got to get the oxygen mask on. And I really need to start filling his tank too. Otherwise we're just going to keep going. And that was,
On our basketball court last year, that memorable team, what it was is I had two reds, right? And they started together, one being the clear leader of the team and things like that. But like, as you kind of said, I appreciate how this one says emotions like It's not usually anger, right? Because that's definitely how it presented.
Oh, yeah.
It made it look like they were furious at each other. And of course, if you have greens and blues, they're like depressed. Even yellows though, right? Because yellows are like, whoa, the harmony is broken. This isn't positive anymore. What's going on?
Yeah.
So it completely crushed us as a team. Like if I could have just figured out the wiring of the Reds and how to leverage it, then it would have helped me out. But what it was they had this sense of a loss of control. What they couldn't control was what everybody else was doing. Like they were doing their part, and then they were super embarrassed if they did mess up because they knew they had messed up. They didn't know how to handle their mistakes. And I appreciate it says emotions like disappointment, embarrassment, or insecurity might be behind the signaling that you're seeing. And that disappointment and embarrassment 100% when it's on a court, when it's on a sports field.
Yep.
And so I saw that even this past football season when you had the kid that yelled at the lineman for missing a block. And I was like, hey, homie, you missed that block too, because your job was to block anybody that came through, and you let him all the way through, but you're going to yell at him? How's that appropriate? Now, again, for a Red, it's like, why did I just do that? And so it was because I was trying to fix the what, and I was like, you're not getting away with that.
Yeah.
Like, and that was my gut reaction. But truly, it's one of those like, okay, this is signaling me to have the conversation about, that was frustrating, wasn't it? That was embarrassing, wasn't it? Like, what are we going to do about it? Let's talk about what we can be in control of. Yeah. All right. We can help. How can we help people out that aren't doing what we think? We can use our words. Yep. Right. And what I've learned at least is, bitter, hateful things don't really land well on other people, but encouraging things really, really help. So if you go to somebody over there and say, hey, will you help me out by doing this and this next time? All of a sudden you're more in control of the situation. Yeah. So this is where it was like so helpful just reading through all these things.
I think the one disciple that keeps coming to my mind with the Reds is Peter.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Peter is such a Red. And you can see how Jesus responds though. Every time he interacts with Peter, he is validating his disappointments, not validating, but acknowledging Peter's disappointment, Peter's resentment, embarrassment.
So you're saying to my Reds, I should say, get behind me, Satan.
There it is. I was waiting on that one. I'll just leave. It's fine. No, but there's quite a bit there that's really true. Because, and again, you started the conversation that is a heart at the center of this chapter, which is you have to get to the why, not just react to the what.
Exactly.
So the biting words and the tone of the Red are unacceptable behaviors. However, if that's what you focus on, send the kid to their room, or you give them some kind of consequence, it's not going to change their heart, because they still are going to be running on empty. They still are not going to be equipped to deal with the situation around them because they have an empty tank. And so you send them to their room and you say, figure out what you've done and come back with a better attitude. No, they're going to be plotting their revenge. I loved that line in this chapter.
Yes, exactly.
Plotting their revenge.
You send them there, and they're not going to be like,
calming down.
No, those were my two. So
I'm
speaking of the Reds and the
sad,
yellows, because it also said the yellows, like, you send the yellow to their room, like to change their heart, and you're going to get up there and be like, all right, so what have we thought about? They're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. After we go get ice cream,
Well, and so speaking of sending into the room, though, like I appreciated again in the back of the chapter some illustrations of what this looks like.
Yeah.
So a teenager, your Red teenager comes home and they're just angry, and they say it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to talk. Don't ask me how it went. And they storm to their room.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually an invitation to go to them and listen to what's up. And you learn that.
Don't go to them like a yellow would.
What's up now?
Don't go to them like a yellow would.
Don't be all like bubbly.
That's not going to help. You have to go to them with the question.
Yeah, not trying to fix.
Yeah.
Well, but like, and I appreciate what it said, right? You're acknowledging and appreciating something about them.
Mm.
I see you're upset. What's up?
Yeah.
What happened? And then all of a sudden that's an invitation to learn that somebody shared something through social media and blah, 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 blah. And they felt out of control, because you can't control what other people put on social media.
Yep.
And so then you remind them like, hey, you've done a great job of being who you are, and people that actually know you know that that's not actually the case. So this is actually going to go away at some point. You've done a great job of controlling what you can control. And sometimes these kind of things are going to be out of our control, and that's really frustrating. And you're acknowledging what's going on and helping them to see, oh, you're right, actually, that's out of our control. What was the toddler? You have the two siblings drawing. Okay. And you really acknowledged one and you didn't acknowledge the other.
Uh-huh.
And the invitation there is to say, and the kid freaks out at you and it's like, oh, you know what? You're right. I did not acknowledge you'd put so much work into this. You did such a great job with this. Let's put it on the fridge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So getting them, so it's similar again, yellows and reds, you're going to see that same kind of need for approval, need for attention, whereas blues and greens are going to be a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just loved these every single time.
Right.
The tween was the joining a band, right? And comes home is like, I'm quitting the band. And it's similar to the basketball team.
Yeah.
Like, and what is it? This red kid has put in so much work to making the band happen, and he's not seeing the
Results
same
and
people putting in the same amount of effort. And I love what it says here. It says, I know how hard you've been working to master the routine, and I can tell you're angered that your friends aren't taking this seriously. Since you're so good at motivating others and leading by example, there's the affirmation. What do you think you could do or say that would convince them to give it their all? Right.
Yeah.
So that give him back. You can control what you can say.
Right.
You can't control the other pieces. I thought that was so great.
Yeah. So spend some time in the back half of this book, spend some time checking these out and just looking for, what are the signals that your kids are sending you. And for me, it's so easy to get caught up in stopping a behavior that I don't want to see. And I completely focus on that rather than on the why behind it. And again, if you are just dealing with the symptoms but never attacking the disease, right? Or it's the same kind of mindset. I can treat symptoms all day long, but if I'm not curing the heart of the issue, the cause of the issue, it's going to keep happening. And usually what it is these needs are not being met. Like that just happens time and time again. So yeah, filling up the tank
With
even when
words.
it's not deserved, even when it's even when it's really hard, they just said something nasty to you, but you're validating their feelings, calling out their strengths, and just making those connections. Like that's what they need to see from you too, that your love is not conditional on their behavior.
Speaking from a coaching perspective, I just saw this interview of a young man who plays for Alabama, and Nick Saban was ripping into him this past week, just absolutely giving him the word. You can see it on national TV. And what you notice is the young man listened the entire time, not once react, and then had one of the best games of his young career. And when the reporters asked him after the game, didn't it bother you that you were being yelled at? He's like, no, I'm not worried about the tone. I'm only worried about what he's saying. And what he said made sense. And so I did what he told me to do. Didn't matter the tone. So right away you can tell for this young man, he was not bothered because he was being affirmed throughout the time by Nick Saban, whatever his gift said, his affirmation. So the words was not impacting him. It was why those words made him become
And I've seen that with Reds. Like oftentimes with Reds, they do require the stronger, like more vocal, match it to slow it down.
Yep.
Not
yell them down.
It has to have that constructive.
Yep.
I see you.
Exactly.
I understand what you are feeling right now.
Yeah, there has to be that connection, right?
Exactly.
It can't just be I'm yelling you or I'm arguing back with you.
Yeah.
There's got to be that sense of no, this person really sees me and
'Cause the Reds
understands,
just
which is
gonna
where that
fight.
player, apparently the coach had done something either previously,
Right.
Built that equity.
said something in that
Yeah.
moment. He knew that coach valued him. He knew that coach saw something in him. His tank wasn't running on empty at that
Well, at
moment
that
because
moment, yeah.
the coach had
already
done
filled it up,
whatever they needed to do prior to
Well, yeah.
to leverage that.
Exactly.
Okay,
That
now we
word,
need to get
leverage.
moving. Yeah.
Exactly.
And for a Red, sometimes when everything feels like it's falling apart, you need somebody
Focus
who's
you.
going to say, I am in control.
Yeah.
Now you do your job. And then that person can kind of settle back into what they need to be doing. So, yeah.
Even going to past sports seasons, like the football season before the most recent one, like Nathan had his heart attack and like we have a Red, right? And his parents had talked to me about how like, yeah, you got to match that. But it was one of those being able to speak in the moment when the other team scores, and that's frustrating, and you're yelling and you're doing all these things. I get that. That is so frustrating. That's not what we expected. I can't control what's happened in the past. I can't control what we do next.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can control what we do next. Right? If you keep getting hung up on that, like that's a different
Yes.
conversation.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
see why you're frustrated. I see how heartbreaking that is because that's not what we expected. But let's control what we do now.
Yeah.
Right? Let's control how we respond. Right? And that's a great way to speak to a red.
You bet.
Yeah. All right. How about our blues?
Ooh, bluesies.
All right. So blues, it was so interesting. Like blues signals will have 0 words, right?
Yep.
So it won't have anything that they're really saying. And again, going back to we're going to put these on hats. So they need safety, sensitivity, support, space, and silence.
Yep.
Okay.
A
So
lot
that
of
is a lot of
S's.
S's. That's good. We got our A's and our S's. Why the Reds get their own little, all right.
Reds
we're
and
figuring that out.
greens don't get the alliteration.
They're
All right,
Christmas
there we go.
colors. So.
Yeah, Christmas, me. Okay. So, but they're going to signal then through moods and silence.
Okay, this video was so funny because every one of the kids in this video was like, I'm going to my room and I want you to leave me alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every one of the children. I mean,
Yeah.
from teenager to
Yep.
little, it was, I'm done
Mm-hmm.
and go away.
And it's
But
really-
that's not necessarily what they needed because they needed safety and sensitivity.
Yeah, I
and
love how they point out
support.
that irony of,
Right,
of
right.
like they need
Yeah.
that support, they need the whatever, but that's what they're going to do. But what's interesting, right, is if a blue goes to their room, they're in their safety and quiet
Oh, yeah.
spot, and they might need 5 to 10 minutes
Yes.
before you open that door.
Yes.
Don't
But
go
then-
immediately.
But then they need you to walk into that
Yes.
door
Right.
because then they're in a safe space. They've had their calming a little bit, and now it's time for support to come in.
And that's going to take a little bit of trial and error when you're dealing with a blue to say, okay, what is that right amount of time?
Just set that timer.
You know, and maybe it's a 5-minute timer, or maybe it's, you know, hey, I'm going to come knock in a few minutes, and if you're good to go, you give me a signal,
That's what I was
you
going
know,
to
or
say.
whatever.
Sometimes
Like
it's the
you tell
ask
me.
Oh, what was
because I
the-
have
what
a
was the
blue, a red
illustration?
blue, and she will let me know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I've learned I've got to knock and
Uh-huh.
I've got to ask permission.
Yep.
It's not, I can't just barge into
in,
that
yeah.
safe space because that is her space. Whereas the other
Sure.
one, I can totally just walk into her room and we're going to have a party in the bedroom, right?
Yeah. It's not.
She is a green, but
Yeah.
it's a different kind of.
I loved one of the illustrations in the back of the book. It was a mom and a son. And son, it was a blue.
Mhm.
They're gonna storm to their room. Okay, you're gonna go to your room. I'm gonna set this chair up for you. So when you're ready to talk about
Yep.
it, I'm gonna be making dinner, and I'm happy to listen to
Yep.
what happened today.
Yep.
And then
When you're
like,
ready.
10 minutes later, they come out, they sit down, and they just let it all out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My daughter, a couple times we've used like a journal, and I'll say, you know, she's upset with something, and then she doesn't want to say it to me because she in her green blue, she doesn't want me to feel sad that she's upset with me about something that I did. So it's easier for her not to say it to my face, but to write it down. So sometimes she'll write me a note and then she'll slide it under my door, you know, or something like that. And that's been a really helpful way too, because it gives me a minute to process like, okay, this is this is a judgmental little
You're reading the note going,
and I got to get past my red self
Mhm.
and get past my blue self, my sensitive side, and to meet her where she is. So yeah, getting creative with how they can tell you when they're ready or how you check in on them can make all the difference in the world. So I love that she just fully admits, because she's a blue, Kathleen's a blue. She says like, it's ironic. It doesn't make any sense. You're going to feel crazy at times trying to talk to your blues, because they are going to push you away, and yet their needs are for support and sensitivity, which they cannot get without you. I guarantee you my mother was pulling her hair out with me as a teenager for this very reason, because I could not figure out how to ask for what I needed, because I knew I needed space and silence, but I did not want to be alone. And I wanted somebody to care about how I felt. And it was just such a weird, vulnerable spot to be in, especially as a hormonal teenager. So I can remember like my mom coming in and being like, what do you need? And I'd be like, I don't know. And she'd be like, do you want me to go? And I'd be like, yes. And then she'd go and I'd be like, but wait. And so I just love that, the realness of that like your blue doesn't even know what they need. You know, they're not going to be able to express it. So don't take it personally. Do not take it personally. Get creative, just keep checking back in. And when they are ready, they will let you know.
I love the scenarios in the back here
Mm-hmm.
with the toddler. It's so interesting. Again, I've been struggling to see like how do you see this in little kids
A
until
blue
this
yeah,
week.
yeah.
And this situation was there's a fire the fire demonstration for the school, right? I had
Mhm.
those as a kid. Firefighters come and show everything, fire trucks.
Yep.
And the whole week, this kid is spitting facts about fire trucks and how much
So
they know,
excited,
and they've
yeah.
been so excited for it. But then the event comes, and they're like dragging behind, don't want to go. And what it is there's not a sense of safety, and it's really loud, and there's a lot of people. It's
Yes.
that very much that introverted needing the small space. So the invitation is to walk over to the kid and say, "Hey, man, I remember how excited you were for this week, but man, there's a lot of loud noises.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. Hey, why don't you stick next to me? And I'll something along the lines of like keep you safe, hold your hand the whole time, right? You know so much about it. Maybe you can keep telling me more about the fire trucks as we see things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then both the illustrations between the tween and the teen deal with something like the one was a pop quiz, one was a secret shared or something. And so similar to the red and the like redirecting to what you can control,
Mhm.
this time it's okay, plan A didn't work. All right.
Yeah.
But you're so smart at figuring out things. Like, what about plan B? Okay, there's a pop quiz. You weren't expecting that. That must be really frustrating. Acknowledging where they're
Yep.
at. You're so good at thinking through things. What's a way that we can respond to this?
Mhm.
Right. Same thing with the kid with the secret shared or whatever. Like that's really frustrating because I know y'all are good friends and you weren't expecting that. But what are some ideas you have for maybe how to remedy this? Like what are some things y'all can do to process? You're such a good processor,
Yeah.
right?
You're really good
Like
at thinking it
figuring
through.
that out. Yeah, I thought that part of the book, like,
Yeah.
it's all slowly building on each other, so it's helping me so much to see it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, greens. You ready for greens? Wrapping up with the greens.
Are you ready for greens?
I think so, because again, this was a helpful chapter for me. So seeing this was so interesting. So when I'm not my needs of harmony, feeling of worth, lack of stress or respect come in, right? So if that tank is empty, how do greens signal? And it says procrastination, which I'm definitely a procrastinator. But it was interesting to see how it connected it to when the tank is empty, because there's a difference. I think I'm just naturally a procrastinator, but when it started really describing, and then it was stubbornness, which is so funny because I always attributed that to my red side.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. So delaying responsibilities or refusing to converse or compromise is really like, I'm always willing to talk, but the whole compromise thing.
Yeah.
And so it's good that I'll start to see that. But particularly the procrastination was, and I saw this in some of the previous chapters and I didn't understand what they were talking about. But like a great example was like mom leaves, tells the green kid, do these things.
Yeah.
And the green's like, yeah, sure. On a Saturday, always. But like Saturday's that one day that you can breathe and do all these things. So the green doesn't do them. Mom gets home and gets mad. Like green, like I told you to do these things. And the green's response is kind of like, you didn't tell me when to do these things. And so I remember in a previous chapter where it was with a green, you need to give them that deadline. Hey, I'm going to give you a few days to accomplish all these tasks so that they can navigate through.
And some check-ins. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found that true for me too. Like I'll find people that get frustrated because you didn't do that. And I'm like, you didn't give me a deadline. Like, if I don't have that deadline,
I've learned that working with
it's
you.
on my to-do list. I was like, it's on my to-do list. It's on my radar, right? We have a few things that are on my radar.
Never.
Yeah. But it's like, so it's really interesting to see that. And so then especially when like, and I'm always a prioritizer. What is the immediate need? And what's so funny is what do I prioritize when there's disharmony?
Yes.
If there's disharmony, we have to deal with that. That's not okay because that's destructive. Worth is more so if someone else isn't feeling worth, then I like value that. Oh, that's not good. And it goes with the harmony. And then that lack of stress, I'm kind of like, there's always stress, right? I don't know. But it was one of those things of particularly that harmony piece, that's always going to get the priority of this has to stop. Like, you know?
Yeah.
So it was so interesting to me reading through those.
Yeah, the word that always comes to mind with greens is like momentum. Like whatever they're at, that's where they're going to stay. And it takes a whole lot to change that momentum. So it has to be self-motivated or else it's just going to be a fight. So like with my daughter, I have to try to make sure she has some control and she gets to choose when she accomplishes the tasks because I know the tasks don't matter to her. You know, like I know that she's not as task oriented as I am. So all right, honey, I know you need to have your best strength and best energy in order to do your math homework. So, we've got 3 things we need to do tonight. What order do you want to do them in? And then she'll tell me, and so then like she knows what's coming, and she's gotten to choose what's going to be the best environment for her to get it done. And then, she'll get a check-in from me. Hey, it's after dinner. We said we were going to work on math homework. Do you want me to sit with you, or do you want to have me check you when you're done? And then she gets to have that ownership of it, which I think is helpful. But it's not just, hey, you've got your list of 17 things. Good luck.
Well, and I think it's breaking it into smaller chunks, right? Because I know with my green kid,
it feels overwhelming.
It's easy to procrastinate and to wait and to let everything pile up. Okay, but then you've got to dig through that pile.
And that's
right.
Horrible.
And you can't just shove the whole pile in front of them and say, now go.
Yeah, that will never work.
Because then the frustration and the pile's just going to get higher and higher and higher, right?
Yeah. And that's a way that you've found to like function. Yeah. And it's necessary and it's helpful to you. And I think for my daughter, it's something that we're learning that she likes, like she realizes that, it wouldn't be her ideal. Like she doesn't just sit down or make a list, but she's realizing like, oh yeah, I need to make sure that I know what's coming and I can break it down into little pieces.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I'm green too. That's my second one. And so what I've noticed is that being a procrastinator, something that I would wait to the last second, what I've done is self-discipline myself with fake deadlines.
Well, sure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those are real deadlines.
Right. And because I know I'm a people person and doing tasks absolutely bores me, I get it done.
So get it done so you can go back to the people.
Yes. So I will do my grad school work way before it needs to be done, only because I don't want to waste my time during those 3 hours.
But that's what's so funny is because I'm weird because I'm Christmas, but like when you talk about your grad school work, I'm like, oh my, you're such a blue.
No, he's just a very desperate yellow.
Yes, exactly.
He's gonna mask blue so that he can get back to being yellow.
Yes, because I don't like being in that space. I don't like being stressed. Like the thing that gets me is like when I have to do something that's people oriented, like doing the sermon or the crew talk or whatever. Like I marinate over it, but I give myself fake deadlines. I need to have an outline.
Sure, yeah.
And get it done with. Yeah. And then I can relax. And
I'm like, I don't want an outline. Just give me the topic. Let's go. Let's go.
And I'm a processor, so that's that weird mix of things. So like I will just have a process that I know, and I know I'm going to need to set aside time. But that time is usually, especially because like everyone else gets priority as a green. Everyone else.
Yes.
So if it's just a task that deals with me, it is going to be the last thing I do.
Yep.
So sermons are usually the last thing I get to do in a week because like I can't. Other people get priority. They're not here like at night, so I'll write my sermons at night, right? I'm not around them then. And then, okay, I'll lose sleep because, but I'll sacrifice that because it's worth it. Because I was noticing as we're going through, there were certain keywords for certain colors. So like red is that sense of control,
right?
Or appreciation. Yellows was that attention, affection, affirmation. Blues were that plan, right? When a plan doesn't go, right? And
order, plan.
Yeah, and invitation to process. The invitation for a green, which I like hesitate to put this out there, is the invitation to help.
Yeah.
So you want to really turn your greens, like, because one of the examples pointed this out to me, the one with the toddler packing the car. All they needed to do is get their shoes on and walk to the car, and it's 20 minutes later and we can't do it. But being able to speak the language of a green, like you got your reds and your blues are going to be so helpful with the packing and all the other stuff and the planning and getting it through.
They're going to Tetris it all, right?
Yellow, make the playlist. But the green, it's going to be like, man, you'll really help me out if you can get your shoes on and get into the car and do this and do this, right? You're going to be speaking a green's language because that's contributing to harmony and helping and things like that. So it's one of those like, there's your key word.
If I say it now, I'm going to manipulate.
Right, I know. That's why I was hesitant. I was like, everybody's going to manipulate me. And thankfully, like, I can put my adult hat on and be like, I would love to help you, but this is my situation. And I'm usually pretty reasonable about that kind of thing. And again, I'm one Uma that is more so I will schedule time. So I will put that on my calendar that this is when I'm going to do this task.
Right.
And I will have I have a great big old to-do list in my phone now. And I use like things like Asana, like to break down tasks. Because one of my favorite ways to help is strategizing things. Like I know that's the way that God has wired me because of my greenness, because of household growing up, all this other stuff. So like I love helping other people strategize to get something done because I can see how it hurts when people don't get things done.
Right.
Sure.
Or when things aren't getting done. So I'm like, how can I help with this? And that's the way you kind of step in. Man, all right. So we got all their colors out of the way. And I think like as the chapter ends, it's kind of just this invitation to, in the moment, instead of reacting, there's an invitation. The keyword, they put it all caps throughout there, pause.
Pause.
First thing you do is pause. And then you respond to the why. Ask yourself, what are the needs, right? So just attention, affection, approval for our yellows, loyalty, sense of control, credit for the work, appreciation for the work for the reds. Blues are that safety, sensitivity, support, space, and silence. Man, that was a really frustrating environment, wasn't it? Yeah. Greens, harmony, feeling of worth, lack of stress, respect, being helpful, right? That need. And then being able to start one, validate those feelings.
Yes.
Start with that. Compliment the strengths. Man, you're wired in such a great way. Like let's think about how we can use those in a situation and just speak their language to things. And ultimately going back to something Melanie shared with us, responding with words that will fill needs.
Yeah.
And not our needs.
Yes, their needs.
Right. Not my need
Their
for control.
needs.
Their
Right,
need
right.
for their innate wiring. Yeah.
Yep.
Y'all, this is good.
This is good.
So
I know.
good.
I'm like sitting there. It is gonna help me on.
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting equipped. Like not just like, oh yeah, this is stuff I should know. Shame on me.
No,
Like I feel like
yeah.
I'm like, okay, I can do these bits and pieces. I can learn this. I can get better.
And no, we're not going to do it right
No.
every
Yeah.
time.
Nope.
I think that needs to be put out
Oh,
there.
But it
yeah.
aggregates. Like it
But
builds
you-
up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the baby steps. And I do, that's what I
Yes.
appreciate. I'm in chapter 4, y'all. And I'm typically like, I like learning. I like you said, I want to write a paper. What a weird guy. But like, it took me until chapter 4 to really be able to use this as the handbook that it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was sitting there like, I was one that, I don't know what this says about my wiring, but I was like overwhelmed. Like, why is all this stuff at the back? Why don't they just put this all? Why didn't they write it differently? Well, that's how my brain was working with it.
But now it makes
But now
sense.
it's like, okay, we're building there. We're going to these pages now. We're doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that
And I highly, of all the books that we read, and this is me maybe being yellow, y'all need to have this book in your hand.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just
Yeah.
not the podcast. Like I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I'm going to equip my crew leaders, my
Good, yeah.
skippers,
No.
right? And I'm like, I need them to read this book because it's so good.
Yeah.
Because you have to process like you just said. It just can't be, I'm just going to print out a couple.
Mhm.
Handouts and go.
That's not
Yeah.
going to work.
Yeah.
You actually have to kind of like marinate in this and soak into the information.
Yep.
Well, and I'm curious then, right? So yellows, I can see like, oh, this is all about how relationships can happen in great ways and utilize all those. And as a green, I'm going, yes, if we just did this, we would all get along, right?
Oh, yeah.
So blue reds, what are you reading?
Oh, I'm
into?
like a list of how to do the things and accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. Like, awesome. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
good.
Yeah.
And I think a red would see it as, all right, cool. In order to get to the goal, we
Yeah.
all have to be acknowledging these things.
Yeah. Here's how I can control what I can control for a better outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a
Massive.
beautiful resource. Highly encourage it.
Good job, Kathleen.
Right? Listen
five.
along.
I'm a little bummed that she put the red first, but that's okay. No, it's just,
I always, even when
She
I
put
did the
yellow
other,
first everywhere else.
I know, that's
Everywhere
all-
else.
I know,
She
right?
did, yeah.
This is Roy G. Biv.
Right? There we go.
See,
Red,
but I am used to
orange,
being
green,
last.
blue.
I'm
Okay.
used to my color being
Oh,
last.
okay,
So
okay.
I'm used to greens being at the bottom.
she just like mixed it up a little bit. I was like, okay, I see you, girl.
I bet that was not her choice. I bet it was
Somebody
marketing.
it's rainbow.
Yeah,
Red,
it was-
orange,
it
yellow.
was somebody with
green,
graphic
blue.
design.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a tangent we don't
That's
need to go into. All right.
Psychoanalyzing.
Well, y'all, as always, I mean, if you enjoyed this episode at all, like please share it. If you're enjoying this conversation, send episode 1 to somebody.
Yeah.
At the very least, like talk. I mean, talk to people about this. Hopefully, you're speaking this language. If it's working, especially,
Oh, yeah.
share this as a gift with someone else. Because that's the beautiful thing is we're just finding wonderful things that people have put out there for people and having this conversation because we think this is kind of key to raising up kids in the faith.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really, really hard to get to that conversation of faith if you're not seeing the kid where they are and what they're doing.
Mhm.
I mean, because ultimately, think about that. I mean, Uma, you mentioned Jesus and Peter's interactions. Like, notice all of Jesus's interactions.
Yes.
He is constantly just acknowledging the person in the moment for
It's
what is going on.
tailored
first.
to them, tailored to exactly what they're searching for, exactly what they truly need, not what they think they need. Like he knows them.
Right, which is what's unique about in if you look at all of his interactions with humans in his time, he affirms them before he brings the truth.
Absolutely.
He
This
affirms
formula,
where,
yeah.
like,
And if the
you-
church could only learn how important that is.
absolutely,
Yeah. To get to have relationships first.
yes,
Yeah.
In order to go. And even in my little, like when I walked in here and did that, we talked about the interns, right? And I was definitely masking red.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to just jump into the conversation, but I knew in order to really get the fruit of what we were doing, I had to acknowledge who they were, build that relationship first.
Yep.
I mean, even thinking about as we're doing student ministry last year and this year, and I'm like, we really need some worship leaders, but I didn't have any clue. But once you start building relationships with those kids, they're like, hey, I want to lead worship. I'm like, okay,
Yay.
we're good.
All right.
But it
Exactly.
is all starting from that relational equity first.
You bet.
100%. Next time we are looking into how your temperament interacts with these different temperaments. And we've had fun just acknowledging what our temperament is, but I am excited to dive into some of those back pages, especially about like, okay, green, how do you typically interact with red? Why do yellows frustrate you? Right?
So get your boxing gloves
Guilty.
and let's go. No, but and another great reason to buy this book is you get to do the test,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you get that as something to look back on. That's a great resource.
Awesome.
Super cool.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time.